Chosen one, hear this clearly. What you have been feeling is not in your head, and it is not you overreacting. It is pressure, but not loud, not obvious. It reaches your spirit before your mind can explain it. Nothing direct has been said, yet your peace is unsettled. You try to move forward, but certain names, updates, or shifts reach you at the exact moment you are trying to heal. You tell yourself not to think too much, yet the pressure does not lift. That is not weakness. That is discernment, recognizing something your mind has not yet named. This is how these traps begin, not with proof or confrontation, but with a disturbance in your peace. From the outside, everything may still look normal, but inside, you know something has shifted. A narcissist does not need direct access to disturb you. If they still know what unsettles you, what pulls your attention, what makes you question yourself, they can create pressure without being present. That is why this feels heavier than heartbreak. This is targeted emotional pressure. And now there is another layer. There is a new supply. They may look like a fresh start, someone being chosen or displayed, but what you feel is not just pain over someone new. It is the pressure of being silently compared, of being positioned against an image without your consent. The trap is not around your body. The trap is around your peace. That is why you feel drained without confrontation, and why your spirit stays alert even when you try to stay calm. God does not reveal everything at once. Sometimes he lets you feel that something is wrong before showing you how it works. Luke 12:2 says what is hidden will be revealed, but before exposure comes, there is warning. If your peace has been under pressure, there is a reason. If it feels like it is coming from more than one direction, there is a reason, because it is. And once you see who is involved, everything you have been feeling will make sense. They know what once mattered to you. They know what you hoped for. They know what kind of silence hurts you. They know what kind of replacement wounds you. They know what kind of image can trigger comparison. They know what kind of dismissal makes you want to explain yourself. They know because they studied you while you were loving them, while you were trying to make peace, while you were still giving them access to sacred parts of your heart. A narcissist learns your tenderness and then remembers it. They learn what makes you stay too long. They learn what breaks your focus. They learn what pulls you into self-doubt. They learn what kind of behavior makes you question your own discernment. Even after distance, even after separation, even after silence, they often still remember enough to disturb you with accuracy. That is why this pressure does not feel random. It feels exact because it is built by someone who knows where the old wounds are. Then there is the new supply. This is where many people get confused, because the new supply does not always look threatening. Sometimes the new supply looks innocent. Sometimes they look unaware. Sometimes they look like the happy ending. Sometimes they look like the one who got what you were denied. But that surface reading misses the real danger. The new supply may not understand the whole pattern, but they are still helping apply the pressure. Their presence is being used. Their image is being used. Their position is being used. Their agreement is being used. Their silence is being used. One person knows your weak spots. The new supply helps keep pressure on those weak spots. This is how it often happens in real life. You start noticing that the energy from both sides feels strangely aligned. Certain phrases sound familiar. Certain attitudes start echoing each other. The timing of what reaches you begins to feel too exact to dismiss. A post appears right when you are trying not to look. A subtle message gets back to you right when you are trying to heal. You begin to realize that you are not only dealing with the narcissist's old influence. You are now dealing with the narcissist plus the visible presence of the new supply, and together they create a pressure system around your emotions. That is what makes triangulation so devastating. The narcissist does not simply move on. The narcissist uses the new supply as a living comparison. The narcissist uses the new supply as proof of a false story. The narcissist uses the new supply as an emotional screen, something to display, something to project, something to place in front of you so that your peace starts slipping again. And the cruelty of it is this: you are often expected to look at that setup and stay perfectly untouched while the pressure keeps building. If you react, you are painted as bitter. If you hurt, you are painted as unstable. If you notice the pattern, you are painted as obsessive. Meanwhile, the narcissist and the new supply can keep standing inside a false image while your silence is mistaken for weakness. But your silence is not always weakness. Sometimes your silence is the first sign that your spirit has started seeing the trap clearly. The narcissist knows where to aim because they had access to your heart. The new supply helps apply the pressure because they have been placed in the role that keeps the comparison active. That is why this situation feels heavier than ordinary rejection. This is not simply about heartbreak. This is about coordinated emotional pressure. One carries the memory of your wounds. The other keeps those wounds visible. One knows your history. The other becomes part of the image used to disturb your present peace. And if you do not understand that, you will keep misreading the trap. Because the trap is not just that the narcissist moved on. The trap is that the narcissist and the new supply are being used together to keep you emotionally tied to something God is telling you to leave. The trap is not designed to destroy you quickly. If it were that obvious, you would recognize it sooner. If it were one loud betrayal, one clear confrontation, one open act of cruelty, then even other people might see what is happening. But that is not how a narcissist usually works when they want to keep control over your inner life. A narcissist often works through emotional hooks, and the new supply becomes part of that hook. The goal is not just to hurt you. The goal is to keep you emotionally attached to the hurt. That is why you can know the relationship is over and still feel pulled. That is why you can want peace and still feel your mind circling the same pain. That is why you can pray, set boundaries, and still feel those strange moments when one image, one update, one rumor, or one indirect signal throws your spirit off balance again. The trap is not only in the event itself. The trap is in the repeated emotional pull that keeps bringing you back inwardly. A narcissist does not always need constant contact to keep the trap alive. If they can keep you checking, wondering, comparing, decoding, defending, or silently reacting, then they still have a line into your peace. And when there is a new supply, that line often gets stronger because the new supply becomes the visible symbol used to keep the wound active. You see the image, you hear the story, you feel the comparison, and now your mind is pulled back into a battle you were trying to leave. That is the trap. It keeps you mentally engaged with something that is spiritually draining you. It keeps your emotional life circling a wound that should be healing. It keeps your focus divided. It keeps your peace fragile. It keeps your prayer life interrupted. It keeps your thoughts returning to the same dark hallway again and again. They do not need access to your life if they still have access to your reactions. That is why some of the strongest hooks in this kind of trap do not look dramatic. They look ordinary. They look like one more glance, one more check, one more effort to understand, one more attempt to set the record straight, one more moment of wondering if the new supply is really getting the life you prayed for, one more moment of asking whether the narcissist changed for them, one more moment of trying to make sense of the same setup that has already been draining you. And each time you go back inwardly, the connection stays alive. That is why Proverbs 4:23 says, "Above all else, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it." Guarding your heart is not about pretending you do not feel pain. It is about refusing to let a narcissist and a new supply keep your inner life tied to a false system. It is about recognizing when something is no longer just painful, but invasive. It is about understanding that what keeps capturing your attention will eventually start shaping your peace. Some of you have not been lacking truth. You have been lacking emotional separation from what the truth already showed you. You know the narcissist is manipulative. You know the new supply is part of the pattern. You know the relationship was unhealthy. You know God has been telling you to move forward. But if the hook is still alive in your emotional system, then knowledge alone will not stop the drain. That is why the trap is so dangerous. It is not simply built around what happened in the past. It is built around keeping you emotionally available in the present. It does not need to keep hurting you in a new way every day. It only needs to keep your heart circling the old pain in a way that never lets peace settle. The narcissist benefits from that. The new supply becomes part of that image, and your spirit pays the price. But the trap becomes even more dangerous in the next stage, because once they keep you emotionally hooked, they no longer just want your pain. They want your reaction. They need your reaction, because your reaction is the evidence they want. The narcissist does not just want you hurt. The narcissist wants you visible in your hurt. The narcissist wants you reacting from the wound. And when there is a new supply involved, that reaction becomes even more valuable to the system they are building. Why? Because your reaction gives them something to use. It gives them a story. It gives them an image. It gives them material. It gives them a way to shift the focus away from what they did and place the spotlight on how you responded. This is how the trap closes. First, the narcissist disturbs your peace. Then the new supply helps intensify the pressure. Then both become part of an atmosphere that keeps your emotional wound active. Then they wait. They wait for the text. They wait for the message. They wait for the public response. They wait for the emotional moment. They wait for the pain to come out in a setting where it can be twisted. And when that happens, everything gets rewritten. Now the focus is not the manipulation. Now the focus is not the triangulation. Now the focus is not the comparison. Now the focus is not the silent pressure. Now the focus is not the narcissist using the new supply as a weapon. Now the focus becomes your tone, your anger, your tears, your instability, your obsession, your inability to move on. It converts a wounded person's understandable reaction into supposed proof that the wounded person is the problem. And many people have lived this exact pain. You stay silent through so much. You absorb so much. You get baited so many times. You watch the narcissist and the new supply keep the image alive. You feel the pressure building, and the one time you finally respond from a wounded place becomes the thing they replay. Not the years of manipulation, not the narcissist's lies, not the role of the new supply, not the slow setup, not the repeated emotional hooks. Your reaction. That is why you must understand this clearly. The trap is complete the moment your wound starts speaking for you. The narcissist already knows what kind of reaction your pain can produce. The new supply helps create the conditions that make that reaction more likely. Then once it happens, both can stand back and act like your response appeared from nowhere. This is why so many survivors get painted as the unstable one, when in reality they were the one being systematically destabilized. They do not need to control your whole life if they can still control your reaction. That line matters, because it explains why so many people keep losing ground when they try to defend themselves from inside the trap. They think they are protecting their dignity, but the environment was never built to honor their truth. It was built to feed on their reaction. Your pain is real. Your anger is real. Your grief is real. Your frustration is real. But if those things are handed to a narcissist and a new supply who are standing inside a distorted system, they will not treat your pain as sacred. They will treat it as material. That is why restraint is not weakness here. Restraint is wisdom. Restraint is spiritual maturity. Restraint is refusing to let your wound become fresh supply for the same system that has been draining you. Isaiah 54:17 says, "No weapon formed against you shall prosper." That does not mean the weapon will not form. It means it will not finish what it came to do. The narcissist may form the setup. The new supply may help intensify the image. The pressure may rise. The trap may be laid. But it still does not prosper unless it gets what it came for. And so often, what it came for is your reaction. That is why you must stop answering every signal. That is why you must stop treating every provocation like a summons. That is why you must stop thinking your dignity depends on explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. That is why you must stop giving visible emotion to a system that survives by twisting it. Because the moment you see that clearly, another truth begins to rise. The new supply is not standing where you thought they were standing. The new supply is not winning, they are being positioned. Not simply what the narcissist did to you in private, not simply the lies, the manipulation, the instability, or the emotional exhaustion, but the sight of the new supply standing where you once stood, carrying a position that looks from the outside like peace, like acceptance, like replacement, like the reward you were denied. That image has tormented many people in silence because it whispers a cruel question into the mind. What if they really are getting the best version of the narcissist? What if the narcissist changed for the new supply? What if the chaos ended with you, and now someone else is receiving the calm, the attention, the kindness, and the stability you prayed for? That question has kept many hearts bound far longer than they realized. It has kept people looking sideways when God was trying to move them forward. It has kept believers trapped in comparison when heaven was trying to call them back into clarity. Because comparison is one of the most effective ways to keep an old wound alive. If the narcissist can no longer reach you through direct access, they will often continue reaching you through image, and the new supply becomes part of that image. That is why you need to see this clearly. The new supply is not winning. They are being positioned. What looks like favor is often function. What looks like peace is often placement. What looks like being chosen is often being assigned a role inside a system that was already in motion long before they arrived. A narcissist does not suddenly become healthy because a new face enters the picture. A narcissist becomes strategic. The person may change, but the pattern does not. The need for supply, image, control, and a false narrative remains. That is why the new supply must be understood correctly. They are not simply the next person. In many cases, they become part of the narcissist's living narrative. They become the visible proof of a message the narcissist wants others to believe. They become the contrast used to unsettle you. They become the image that keeps comparison alive. They become the person placed in sight to make you question what was real, what you meant, and whether your suffering was somehow your fault. And that is where the trap becomes especially cruel, because the new supply does not always look like a victim at first. They may look happy. They may look secure. They may look as if they stepped into something blessed. They may look like they have the very thing you once begged God to fix. But appearances inside narcissistic dynamics are often built to deceive. What you are seeing may not be peace. What you are seeing may be positioning. What you are seeing may not be love in its true form. What you are seeing may be utility. That is why you must stop reading the new supply through the language of envy. Envy will always misread the scene. It sees blessing where there may only be function. It sees security where there may only be temporary placement. It sees winning where there may only be usefulness. Psalm 37 warns us not to fret because of evildoers and not to be envious of those who do wrong, because what appears to flourish for a season is not necessarily established by truth. That warning matters here. The narcissist and the new supply may look aligned for a time. They may look convincing for a time. But if the structure is still built on comparison, manipulation, distortion, and the need to keep someone else emotionally affected, then the instability has not disappeared. It has only changed form. And there is another truth that must be faced honestly. The new supply may be used, but that does not always mean they are innocent in every sense. If they accepted a full story about you without question, that matters. If they echoed the narcissist's narrative, participated in subtle disrespect, or helped carry the atmosphere that kept your wound alive, that matters. A person can be deceived and still participate in harm. A person can be positioned and still help keep the pressure active. That is why this must be understood with maturity, not sentimentality. The new supply is not the prize. The new supply is not proof that the narcissist became whole. The new supply is not evidence that you were the problem. The new supply is often the next visible piece in a pattern that still needs someone to fill a role. And once you understand that, something begins to loosen inside you. The comparison starts losing power. The false question starts dying. The lie that says, they changed for someone else because you were not enough, begins to break. Because the truth is not that the narcissist suddenly found peace with someone better. The truth is often that the narcissist found another role to fill, another image to display, another person to use in keeping the old target emotionally entangled. The new supply is not winning. They are being positioned, and once that positioning has served its purpose, the weight of the role begins to show. Because what is built on performance cannot rest. What is built on distortion cannot stay clean. What is built to keep someone else emotionally trapped eventually begins to carry its own corruption inside it. That is why the appearance of peace in narcissistic systems must never be confused with the presence of peace. And that is exactly why God is not warning you to keep watching them. He is warning you to step out before you give any more of your peace to what was never built on truth. God is warning you to step out, not to fight harder. This is where the warning becomes holy, because once you begin seeing the pattern, the natural urge is to fight harder, to explain more, to defend more, to expose more, to correct every lie, to answer every signal, to make sure the narcissist does not get away with the story, to make sure the new supply does not keep believing what is false, to make sure someone finally understands what was done to you. Those urges feel justified, because you are not dealing with a small wound. You are dealing with distortion. You are dealing with pressure that keeps moving around you, while you are expected to stay composed inside it. But this is where many people lose years of peace. They mistake warning for an invitation to stay engaged. They think seeing clearly means they must now stand inside the trap and defeat it. They think discernment means confrontation. They think truth means more explanation. But some systems are not built to honor truth. They are built to consume reaction. And staying inside them longer does not free you. It drains you. That is why God's warning is not, fight harder. It is, step out. Step out before the trap tightens around your mind. Step out before every quiet moment becomes another replay. Step out before your prayer life starts revolving around what the narcissist is doing and what the new supply represents. Step out before the need to be understood by the wrong people becomes stronger than the call to be whole before God. Step out before your peace depends on whether their image finally breaks. This is not exposure for spectacle. This is warning for escape. That is why this is reaching you now. Not to make you suspicious, not to make you obsessed, not to keep your focus on the narcissist and the new supply, but because God sees what continued emotional availability will cost you. He sees how much of your inner life this pattern has already taken, and he interrupts it before it takes more. Scripture says God gives you power, love, and a sound mind. That means you are not called to stay mentally entangled in what is draining you. You are called to step out of it. And here is the truth many people resist. Some people do not misunderstand you by accident. They benefit from misunderstanding you. The narcissist benefits from your confusion. The narcissist benefits from your need to explain. The narcissist benefits from the new supply holding a false version of you in place. And once that is true, continued explanation is no longer wisdom. It becomes surrender of sacred energy. That is why boundaries matter. That is why silence can become holy. That is why no contact, in many cases, is not just strategy. It is stewardship. Because if the narcissist and the new supply are operating inside a trap that needs your emotional participation, then every opening becomes more drain. Every look back disturbs your peace. Every attempt to correct the image feeds the same system again. God is not showing you this so you stay attached. He is showing you this so you stop feeding what is draining you. That is the warning. Not try harder. Not explain again, not keep watching, not wait for them to understand. Step out. Step out in prayer. Step out in clarity. Step out in restraint. Step out in silence that protects your spirit. Step out in boundaries that do not require permission. Step out before the trap takes more of your peace, your focus, your strength, and your time with God. Because the warning is mercy. It is heaven refusing to let you remain emotionally available to something that was built to keep your wound active. And once you obey that warning, you will see the truth clearly. The trap was never as powerful as it felt. It only felt powerful because it still had access to you. The trap collapses when you are no longer available to it. Not when the narcissist confesses. Not when the new supply sees the truth. Not when every lie is corrected. Not when everyone finally understands what happened. It begins when it loses access. Access to your reaction. Access to your attention. Access to your repeated checking. Access to your comparison. Access to your emotional availability. Access to your peace. That is what changes everything. Because systems like this feel powerful while they are still feeding on you. They feel overwhelming while your mind is still circling them. They feel in control while your emotions still answer every signal. But once you become unavailable, the structure begins starving. That is why real silence is so threatening. Not silence that is waiting to be noticed. Not silence that still checks from a distance. Real silence. The kind that comes from seeing the narcissist clearly, seeing the new supply clearly, and refusing to keep feeding the same system from inside your own heart. And when that happens, everything shifts. The narcissist loses the emotional current they were drawing from. The new supply is left standing in a role that now has to carry its own weight. The comparison stops landing. The image starts straining. What looks stable begins to feel heavy, because what is built on distortion cannot hold forever. Galatians 6-7 says, "Whatever is sown will be reaped." If they sowed comparison, instability follows. If they sowed pressure, pressure returns. If they built a system that needed your wound to stay active, that system carries its own consequences. But hear this clearly. Your calling is not to watch that happen. Your calling is to leave the field where it was planted. That is where everything changes. You were not losing. You were being kept emotionally available. You were not weak. You were under pressure from a system designed to stay alive through your reaction. You were not imagining it. You were sensing the trap before you had language for it. And your withdrawal is not failure. It is the breaking point of the trap. Because peace does not return by time alone. It returns when access is cut off. When the narcissist no longer has a line into your reaction. When the new supply no longer exists in your comparison. When your attention is no longer feeding what was draining you. That is when things begin to come back. Your mind quiets. Your prayer deepens. Your body releases tension. Your peace stops depending on what they do next. That is freedom. Not because everything disappears, but because the trap no longer has a place inside you. So hear this clearly. If God is warning you that two people are secretly trapping you right now, it is not to make you afraid. It is to set you free. They may still have the image for a season. They may still look aligned for a season. They may still hold the story together for a season, but you are no longer inside it. You have discernment. You have clarity. You have the invitation to step out. And once you do, what felt powerful begins to lose its hold, because it was never sustained by truth. It was sustained by your availability. And now that you see it, you do not have to keep giving it. Amen. We are what we believe we are. C.S. Lewis. What you release no longer defines you. What you refuse no longer controls you.